Hey! Oh, this is a very creative design, and, well, not a fan of the protest method, but, again, props to the political propaganda spin here. I like it. So I'm just gonna put this in here. So once again, YouTube has ample time for its auto-generating thumbnail program to, well, do its work, because this video will contain some amount of... That was this very slow cicada. I've actually never seen a cicada fly before. Anyway, will contain some amount of nudity. Once again, non-sexual nudity. And so, I just felt like telling this little story, as why not, before I actually get into the content of the video, main content. So, I am now in the Cartierville district, which, to correct myself from the last video, I was wrong on the pronunciation of the second half of its name. It's not Carterville, it's Cartierville. So, my mistake. But I'm in this borough now, and I have my campsite stationed just here in this patch of woods, which is a park, right across from a public sports center, which might be actually the largest one in all of Montreal, but I'll have to look further into that. But anyway, so I've been here for about 3 days, and I'll go into more detail about all that in Exploring Montreal Part 6. But 2 nights ago, oh no, sorry, actually 3 nights ago, sorry. 2 nights ago is when I put this stuff out, but anyway, 3 nights ago, I was considerably tired from my journey over here. And so I set up my tent and everything, and I decided to keep the flap open with the netted screen just across to let airflow get into the tent because of some amount of heat, so that I could just stay cool in my sleep. And I also decided to sleep on top of my sleeping bag instead of inside it. So I did that, and I got into bed at a decent hour and fell asleep at around maybe 8:30 p.m. quite early. I woke up then at about maybe 10:40, so around 2 hours later, in the pitch darkness, with nothing but the moonlight, because apparently, I don't know if it was a half moon or if it was a waning moon, but some amount of the moon's reflected sun rays back down onto Earth could be seen from where I was in the forest, illuminating only so much. And I'll relate this to something else I'll mention later in the video, but something must have disturbed my sleep, because I started to hear rustling on the opposite side of my tent where I had both flaps, the door flaps, closed. Started to hear a bunch of twigs cracking and just brush from fallen tree debris and the grass and all that moving about. And all of a sudden, one raccoon peeks its head out into view in front of the open tent flap. And I was like, okay, well, this isn't unusual. I've dealt with this before. And then another one came into view. And another. And another. And another. And then I could hear at least maybe 3 more just scurrying up beside the tent. And in total, there must have been at least 7 to 8 or maybe even 9 raccoons. And most of them stood right in front of the tent flap with it open, and I have no clue if they saw me or not. They probably did, or at the very least they could sense that there was some living organism inside of the structure. And another one peeked its head through one of the smaller flaps that aren't the door, like the window flaps. You've probably seen them in, you can see them in videos I've made here and on Pornhub when I've been in the tent. It peeked its head through it. Not into the actual tent, but it was able to slide its head up under the flap and look through the netting of the little window section of the tent lining. And some of them were quiet, others were making noise like along that sound, some amount of growling, and I was terrified. That was easily another one of the most terrifying things that's ever happened to me in my life. So I just laid there, frozen, having this staring contest with 8 or 9 raccoons just outside my tent. And mind you, again, the only thing that's protecting me from them, not that I thought the only thing that was protecting me from them was this very thin, very exposed netting. That was it. And some of them pressed their claws up against it. They were looking in. But, so I just laid there, and then eventually they began to move out. They were only there for maybe 6-7 minutes, and then they wandered over towards Cardi B, and I think maybe some of them wandered over towards Camden, because I had him set up against a tree right beside me, and then they wandered off. And I laid in that position until they were gone. And then, terrifyingly, I decided to, once I heard that they had moved away to a point where I couldn't audibly notice them anymore. So I slowly opened my tent flap, then grabbed the outside flap that wasn't netted hold it down, shut it slowly, and then shut the netting, and breathed a massive sigh of relief. And then the next day, which was 2 nights ago, I went out to explore the area here, and whilst doing that, I went and bought cayenne pepper and cinnamon, which are ground spices that, well, I bought the ground forms, which are spices that very much irritate raccoons' sense of smell because they have a very keen and very active sense of smell for scavenging. And so it's known as a natural deterrent for them. Irritates their passageways so that they'll stay away, they won't want to come near. And I sprinkled that all over my tent, all over Cardi B, all over Camden, all over the whole area that I was in, which was a bit of a stupid idea because it irritated my face and some amount of my nasal senses when I was in there getting ready for bed, but it was worth it overall. So, okay. I don't think any of the raccoons were going to hurt me if they did end up getting in or decide to use their claws to like slit the lining. But either way, it was still terrifying. And most likely none of them were rabid. If they were, then they were in the very early stages of a rabies infection because none of them were displaying any sort of symptoms of rabies. But anyway, so that was terrifying. Oh, and yes, another thing. So I'm going to a local laundromat to do some laundry today, this time for my clothes and my snow pants that I haven't worn since April. And in the bag that I have my snow pants in, it's gotten very molded and deteriorated from the rain, so I'm going to have to throw it. But in it, unfortunately, is the mask that I purchased for Halloween of last year that I showcased in Exploring Ottawa, part 3, I believe. Yeah, was it part 3? Yeah, it was part 3. And it was the most incredible mask I'd ever seen made for the holiday. And I was very happy to have bought it. It's incredibly well made, but sadly, given the state that my lifestyle is right now, and just as a protection to my health, I'm not going to be wearing it. Even if I was to wash it, I don't really have the means to in great lengths right now. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to chuck it, and hopefully it'll be recycled. So just sign it off. So long, incredible steampunk cyborg cat mask. You were great for the time that I used you, but, well, I wish I could have gotten to use you more. Probably should have kept you in my backpack instead of, well, an old bag. But, either way, thank you once again to the designer in whatever labor factory you're working in. as I bought it at a fucking Shoppers Drug Mart. You did an incredible job with it, and I was grateful for it. And know that it didn't go to waste, at least not entirely. So thank you. Okay. Recording this a little later than I had, well, initially hoped to be doing, but, well, whatever. Still have a decent amount of daylight left. So, yeah. Yes, I'm wearing the crotchless slip-on that I purchased whilst in Ottawa that I somewhat showed in terms of my chest section actually, it was in Exploring Gatineau, Part 1. But, this time, though, I think I'm just going to be half naked for this video. So, yeah, why not? The shirt is rather comfy, along with, well, this underneath it. And it might be a bit of a hassle to take off at the moment, so works very well actually with my boots, which I was thinking might be a problem without socks, but for the most part not. Actually, it seems to be more breathable, or skin on my feet. So, yes, though, as you can tell probably, I've started to tear somewhat because of, well, my movement and activity, but, well, and once again, YouTube, this is non-sexual nudity. And this, just because it's, well, crotchless slip-on, is not inherently sexual. It can be used for sexual representation, which was its initial creation, but just wearing this is not inherently sexual, so don't you dare take down this video or send me a strike of any kind. So, position. Is that better lighting? Yeah, it might be. Okay. So, getting a bit more comfortable being a nudist. And, well, why I'm doing this video specifically nude is because, one, I felt like doing so. Also because the topic for this is obviously highly, well, it's about human vulnerability more so, to some degree, but if we're going to be more specific, loneliness. Now, if you're not familiar with my content by now, well, then you're going to probably have to get familiar with it to understand what I'm talking about here. But it relates to my psychobiological theory of interactive loneliness, which sum up, I'll just state here. Interactive loneliness, from my research, is the idea that, which I firmly believe, human beings have, every human interaction that we have with one another, of our own species, of other animal species, even with plant life, the surrounding ecosystems, all this, and why we go towards enacting in social groups is because, in relation to our 5 inherent human desires and biologic thanatophobia, we develop this subconscious uncomfortability with our inherent intrinsic internal loneliness towards not ever fully being able to express our subconscious wants for our 5 desires and our evolutionary instinctual fear of death unconsciously. We go towards interactions with other humans because of this attempt to subconsciously cope, potentially even to absolve, but make a distinction in wording, because just to make it easier to understand, conscious, unnatural attempts at absolving loneliness. So I use the word cope. We go towards other interactions with people as a coping mechanism for our internal solitude, cognitively. And in relation to this, I don't know why, in terms of my research for the theory, I don't currently have any idea as to why we become uncomfortable subconsciously by the realization of our mental isolation for our emotional wants, but we do. Just the same as I don't know why, for the 5 inherent human desires, we specifically desire meaning, control, understanding, uniqueness, and familiarity. I don't specifically know why we've evolved to psychobiologically desire those things and also interact with others in this way. So, because of this, no matter what, even in the presence of apathetic psychological disorders, or also motivational psychological disorders, which are rarer, as far as I can tell, than apathetic ones, but nonetheless, how psychological disorders have formed. But even with the disrupt to socialization, pro-socialization, you will still, in one form or another, as has been demonstrated over millennia of historical evidence, you will still go towards interactions with people, or at the very least, conceptual ideas or contraptions, inventions created by humanity to have a sense of, in relation to our desires of familiarity and understanding, a sense of solace. That is innate. Can't escape that. It's genetic. And So, and because of this is why we are pro-social beings. As far as I'm concerned, interactive loneliness is the cause of our pro-socializing behavior, naturally. It's the only reason, as far as I'm concerned, that we are pro-social. Because if you have seen my diagrams for the 5 inherent human desires, which showcases biologic thanatophobia and interactive loneliness in the subconscious, how it works, and then our wants to obtain fulfillment through conscious motivation that results from the 5 subconscious desires, and if that is disrupted by conflict leading to conscious apathy, which then can, in an apathetic response, culminate in emotional disorders, and in some cases as well, motivational overfixation can cause motivational disorders with problematic fulfillment and disrupt again our socialization, which is part of our behavior, and in that regard disruptive to other people if you're acting in such ways because of the disorders. But as far as I'm concerned, it's the only engaging element with other human beings that is part of our psychobiology. Because if you look at the diagrams I've created in the community tab right now, and as I showcase the original ones in my scientific proposal videos, and also in the last scientific proposal video explaining the paradox of existence, I showcased at the end my newer revised, recreated diagrams. If you've seen them, I think it'd be worth noticing that interactive loneliness, how it results in pro-socialization, is something that I call loneliness projection, or outward projection, including mentality, personality, and persona, and behavior, all combinations of the psychological state, towards our communal environments. It's the only it comes from a self-centered place, but it's the only non-overtly selfish portion of our psychological makeup. It's the only, I guess I would say, in relation to how we act, selfless, even though I no longer believe that human beings are innately selfless. But it's the reason for why we act in selfless ways, to help create a beneficial outcome for all of us involved. Because in relation to empathy, how we develop the cognitive ability for compassion and empathy, we understand in a normal functioning human emotional state that other human beings have these same wants as us, or feel these same emotions as us, even if you don't understand the technical terminology that I'm laying out here for you in psychiatric science. If you don't understand that, either way, in whatever form, culturally and interpersonally, that you've formed to understand these things, whatever way. still naturally have that. That's part of human nature in relation to all of it. But still, it's the least self-centered and only attempt at being social and being collective with other human beings in our entire natural psychological essence. Because everything else in our psychobiology, as far as I'm concerned, is overtly selfish. It's very much me, protect me, I want this, and I hate that because it's disrupting this for me, and I want to do this, and so forth. So, there's that. I just thought I'd lay that out first as an explanation. But on the same topic as that, in recent years, there has been, sadly, this growing idealization of romanticizing loneliness, conscious loneliness, in relation to taking yourself away from not just engagement with other human, like physical engagement with other human beings, and metaphysical in relation to conversation, but specifically having trust in other human beings and this giving in to dissatisfaction with any interactions with other people. And the main topic, as you probably read the title for this video, well, of course you, well, unless you just rapid fire clicked, but I'm sure you have. I think that is a toxic and detrimental philosophical livelihood. That's a horrible thing to idealize and want. That's a terrible thing. Now, let me explain why I feel that. So, in recent years, it's been declared that as of current modern day global world, that the field of psychology, which is true to the degree of conscious absolvement of loneliness and trauma because of it, that we are living in the era of loneliness, of this mass societal alienation, and it being declared as a pandemic, which, again, consciously is true. Absolutely. And many of those in the neuroscience, specifically psychological field, have been trying to gain more of, I guess, a cohesive understanding of where this is coming from. But as far as I'm concerned, in relation to everything else I discuss, we know why. Not disregarding just so much the fact as our innate loneliness and our subconscious coping mechanism of interactive loneliness, disregarding that to some degree, we have seen how oppressive sociological forces, whether in the oppression of something that is beneficial or detrimental, doesn't matter in a societal setting, both, oppression of both, in authoritarian tactics and these alienating, belittling, and dehumanizing methods of population control, we've seen how this has destroyed various demographics communally, caused mass traumatization to a large extent, which has caused ripple effect, obviously. And because of all these factors, this generational trauma that has occurred, we're seeing this conscious loneliness pandemic more readily, especially in the digital age. But as in relation to that as well, one, for eons, humanity has evolved to function in an attempt at coping with internal loneliness, as I've just stated. That's been a given. That's why we even go towards cooperation with other human beings. Why we always will, unless that was somehow to be eradicated from our intrinsic biology. But as well as that, the mass alienation of people has been around for a very long time. Sure, we saw mass movements, activist movements, throughout many historical events, and we've seen groups of people forming cultural revolutions or countercultural revolutions, again, throughout history, and shifting in terms of social attitudes towards various moral values and cultural, in relation to that, ideologic cultural values. But the thing is a lot of people, especially in the main research fields for human social studies, psychology, neuroscience as a whole, sociology, anthropology, history, things in relation to that, things of the sort. There's kind of been this idea that it's only now that these massive waves of people, especially in relation to younger generations, but mass effect in older generations as well, as I'm about to state, feeling alone, feeling like they're in a space of complete aloneness from their fellow peers. Well, the only reason now that we're seeing it more readily is because we have more eyes on us, as far as I'm concerned. This has existed in mass waves for many years as the world has spiraled into societal destruction and disrupt over millennia of suppression and disregard of entire people groups and how they have functioned and interacted with one another and the surrounding environments they've been in for years, whether again in a better or worse way, which there have been for those who are oppressed, heavily oppressed, and have been heavily oppressed from right-wing authority, are mainly beneficial as far as I'm concerned. And yes, there are detrimental practices in there too, but not as readily as certain other practices. But anyway, this spread of communal destruction has resulted in people amongst the average populace of these demographics feeling left behind in relation to those who have actually had more so counter ideas or counterpoints to some degree to movements involved with their demographic or other demographics that are interconnected with them to their collective ideals. But and in relation to this often being shunned for it, to a point where it's just seen as impractical and detrimental to the collective cause, when in reality it may not have been. And that doesn't mean that the collective cause was a problem entirely to begin with at all. It just means that a good idea that these specific individuals may have had was pushed to the sidelines as being seen as not pro our ideology enough, or what we think would be good for our sector of society. And this has resulted in alienation of those people. as well as those who may have subtly agreed with them and not cognitively been very readily aware of it, or to those who had participated in mass movements or have been in support of mass movements a certain way in a civilization, in the political arena. But, well, as far as I'm concerned, when those, as we've seen, though many don't want to accept, we've seen fail, and the oppressor of whichever demographic it may be, see it take on subtler forms for tactics of control. People in the older generation category have felt very lonely as well, consciously, which is what has resulted in, as far as I'm concerned, in what would be considered, I guess, typically a more rightist conservative mindset. This, I'm calling, I guess, an addiction to nostalgia of the past. Of, God, I remember when the world actually had made sense. I remember when there wasn't all this, all that, all these, whatever the young people do now. I miss the old days, sort of thing. It's resulted in that. And for the younger generations, this passing on of loneliness and this disregard, dismissal of their humanity, their cultures that have formed, the beneficial and detrimental again, has resulted in feelings of mass confusion and lack of trust from those who were seen, I guess, traditionally as maybe the caregivers or protectors of them. And in this regard as well, I feel subtly a lot of young people have seen the failures of movements that had incredible holistic ideals behind them, philosophically and morally, overall. In the past, they've seen them fail to such a degree where, even though they themselves believe in the same ideals as the individuals of the past, they've kind of just gone towards a more apathetic approach of things. And it's so strange because most of my generation claim they want change, but either they don't know how to make actual change happen, or they want a very easy solution that is just... This is the attitude of a lot of my generation, and I don't want this to sound like I'm not at all coming at this from the favor of said older generations for those who have been traumatized. And this want for the whole nostalgic era of the 1950s to come back. Mass destructive era in many regards. Beneficial things to it, but mass destructive cultural, societal attitudes as far as I'm concerned. But this is... I'll sum up my generation's ideas, I guess, in one sentence, or I'll try to. Okay, this is important, but fuck, I don't know. I hope this happens, but fuck, I don't know what to do. I got this going on, I got that going on. Yeah, the world's fucked. All this is fucked. But God, I hate that. I wish that would be different. I want that to change. I'm in support of this group and against hurt towards these people. But, well, whatever, I guess. Or not gonna do, actually I'm not gonna do that one. I might get my channel striked for that on here. This isn't sexual content, but I think, you know, addiction in relation to conscious absolvement for my line of work on another site. That. So, and no, that is not me culturally degrading those who vape or smoke weed. There are benefits to those as well, in terms of a sense of euphoria and relaxation, in moderation. But regardless, I'm trying to represent this apathy that has taken hold. So this is because of this is now culminated in what I'm seeing as romanticizing loneliness. There are those, and also romanticizing psychological illness, which it relates to this, but I'm not going to so much focus on that portion of the psychosociological element of this, as I am just specifically for idealization of solitude. But it obviously relates to it. So, what I'm seeing a lot of, especially in internet discourse for indie commentary channels, is this idea of you need to learn to be happy and find full love in yourself by yourself, and you need to learn to just be in that loneliness and stick in that loneliness to have more fulfilling interactions with other people. That overall, now, to those of you who agree with that, how I explained it there might sound fantastic. What's wrong with that? That's what most of modern psychology and just self-help ideals would praise if they were of more of a leftist discourse. And it's another one of those things that on the surface, it sounds fantastic, it sounds hunky-dory, it sounds like it works well in practice, just it sounds plausible on the surface. as far as I'm concerned, the reality is, you will not, by your very nature, be comfortable by yourself. Entirely. You will not. This idea that you need to be happy being alone, as far as I'm concerned, is a very big disregard to the emotional importance for our nature, because many people, well, they don't know about it, at least not the way I'm describing. Our need for communal help and care from one another. I think, in this regard, I think you should learn to be functional by yourself. Yes, I think you should learn to be emotionally functional and have things to enjoy that you enjoy about yourself being alone, and in terms of external things you enjoy in your environment when you are in physical and conscious emotional solitude. But in that regard, it should not be a goal to be in that conscious solitude, which is what I'm seeing a lot of on the internet, on here, and in various portions of the psychological community. In terms of research, doctors who actually are in the regulatory healthcare systems of the world treating patients, and those of theoretical work and analysis, all this. I'm seeing this come about, and it's destructive. This idea that the only satisfaction that will come to you is when you are alone, in terms of the most satisfying that I can get in terms of psychological gratification to our 5 subconscious desires. That the most fulfilling it can be is when you're alone, is complete nonsense. And how can I prove that? Well, I've just explained years of evidence that we work collectively, have gone together in groups of whatever demographic it may be, or just in people's interpersonal lives specifically, for help to achieve what we individualistically want. We've seen how people become highly afraid and highly disrupted and dysfunctional when they're left in an alienated state. This cognitive area of no one understands me. Don't get caught again, please. And in certain cases, we've seen how people have become completely psychologically broken, disrupted, and gone into complete states of hysteria because of isolation, emotionally and physical isolation. We've seen how they've gone delirious, or specifically in just the emotional state, psychotic, delusional. We've seen how they've become anxiety-riddled and fearful beyond a doubt. And people will use those examples as an argument for, well, this is why you need to critically think, yes, but learn to be alone in a healthy manner, accepting yourself as you are. No, that's not the problem as far as I've observed in my psychological analysis of human beings. No, you accepting yourself for who you are, not in relation to who you were before you may have formed psychological disorders. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'll talk about this in a different video, disorders are not who you truly are, or at least who you were before initially. And they are problematic of yourself. But regardless, if you've accepted that, whether or not you try and change that, accepting yourself, that's not, and being comfortable with yourself, your own thoughts, mentally, that's not gonna stop the want for someone to talk to. That's not gonna stop the want to be pro-social with people. Because in relation to this, another example of the biological properties of interactive loneliness is vocalized self-communication, talking to oneself, which we all do to some degree or another, because in relation to apathetic response, we get bored and we get afraid of not vocally expressing the ideas that we're having to someone, even if that someone is just our own voice. Hold on, my phone is dying, so let me plug it in with my portable charger. Okay, refocused. Kind of went out of focus there. Yeah, okay. Well, it's plugged in now. So, okay. I did actually decide to take off the crotchless slip-on because it was getting a little muggy in here. The heat has been quite bad today, so well, despite its breathability, not enough for me at the moment. Angle up so you can see my face more, please. Okay, there. Okay, so we clearly know that people need human connection. Not just with themselves. It's not enough for a stable, healthy, emotional state of a human being. It's not enough. And for another reason, this idea that we know, which is, as far as I'm concerned, most often delusional, it's not a true belief. There's this idea that, that would be the only, in a more misanthropic way, the only way human beings could function well together and help with this collective loneliness, but it's impossible for us to function that way because of our selfishness. Completely untrue. As I've just pointed out, we have millennia of evidence again of how this has worked to a beneficial degree. Yeah, I think you're in focus. Whatever. How there's this idea that we can't function like that we can't ever be satisfied cognitively with interactions with others, which is why I see so many people flocking towards these groups online that say, yeah, I've always found it better in solitude. I've never really connected with anyone. I interact with people and I'm fine with them, and I love meeting people, but I'm better alone. As far as I'm concerned, the only reason you're better alone is because, one, people don't recognize their intrinsic loneliness. Well, we don't accept it. And they don't accept that, or don't realize the fact, as far as I'm concerned, that it can be satisfying enough of an interaction with other people. And naturally, it will never be exactly how we desire it for our subconscious state. But it can be fulfilling enough, as I think has been observed. The idea that, and in regards to this as well, the idea that solitude will just bring us all collective peace, that we'll be able to function better with one another and be happier together if we learn to be happy by ourselves. Sorry, don't think that's how it works either in relation to how what we obtain happiness from most often. Because here's the thing, it's very clear to me that all of these people who are idealizing this praise of solitude over sociability, they're clearly not happy with it, at least not to the extent that they think. You know why? Because every single person, every single one of you, anyone who I've observed from an external parasocial point of view, or in my interpersonal life, who have given the advice, or in relation to my inner circle, have given me the advice that, Cam, you need to be happy by yourself. I think you can only ever truly have good social connections if you learn to be by yourself and be comfortable and happy by yourself. All of you are absolute hypocrites. You are. Because you're clearly not happy by yourself. If you were happy by yourself, you wouldn't be telling me that information. You wouldn't be interacting with me at all. If you wouldn't be going towards human socialization, as much as you do, at the very least, when you're forced to be interacting with people. You might not have the other option to, but you have a choice. Where it's very clear that you're willingly choosing to go towards other human beings. Even in moments where I think we all know that you recognize, if you do some self-reflecting, you would recognize yourself, yeah, I did have the option to not go to that event with someone, or go to that event at all, but I did. Or I had the option to not chat with this person online. I had the option to just do something by myself, but I did. Or, let's go with the internet community right now. I have the option to not post information about how I learned to be by myself and comfortable with my own solitude. And I could just be alone and not have social media. I could be comfortable with that and just let the world be as it is. I don't need to share this information because I'm happy just being by myself. You have the option to not create a YouTube channel dedicated to this sort of thing. But you did. And you continue to evolve it. You continue to post. You continue to share your life advice on how I'm better off alone, and how I think everyone else would be better off if they learned to recognize and accept things about themselves. And then maybe you could find better social relationships if you learned to be alone. It's clear that you're not happy yourself being alone. At the very least, for most of you, with how frequently you post and how frequently you rant about it, you talk about it, you discuss it. And if I got to know you in your interpersonal life, I'm sure you would be doing the same, clearly to some degree, in your interpersonal life as well, as I've seen people do for me. For as much as you're fine with being alone, you sure do have a lot of social interactions. And you sure do talk about how much you're comfortable and composed and relaxed so much more when you're alone than when you're talking to people or when you're engaging in discourse in a more introverted sense. Even though you do it at a frequent basis. Probably either at an equal length, maybe even some of you more, than being lonesome. And that doesn't mean that you're extroverted personality-wise, as far as I'm concerned, on the spectrum of, well, in relation to cluster B personality for introversion. You could still be introverted in that regard and get more you get more peace for then continuing to engage in pro-socialization from just having more time for yourself to be alone and relaxed. Yes, doesn't mean you're extroverted, but there's this lack of self-awareness of, even though you are an introvert, how much you clearly do enjoy, or those who might claim to be more antisocial, how much you are pro-social and how much you actually engage and clearly enjoy other people's company. Now, in relation to all this, let me state, this is not me telling you to be social no matter what, to always try and force this performative extroversion, adorn this false persona, and just pretend to be very happy around people, constantly be putting yourself in very interactive environments with others, very emotionally vulnerable in the moment, what you're sharing with others consciously. Not in the sense of just being vulnerable, just being comfortable in another person's presence, but in a... Oh, dear. Okay, well, hopefully you'll hold out. Guess my portable charger didn't have as much... Come on. No, you'll have to do. It didn't have as much power in it as I thought. But, well... Okay, I think you get what I mean. This... This idea that okay, I don't think you should, in this idea that you should be trying to be this incredibly outgoing person forcefully. If you learn to be that and go through cognitive shifts in projection of personality and personification, that's fantastic. Nothing wrong with being introverted, but if you become more extroverted, that's fantastic. And if you're extroverted and you become more introverted, that's fantastic. But, so, obviously, you should be, I think, trying to some degree, engage with other human beings. Because, on one end, where this becomes a problem on fine balancing is... Oh, come on. My lash. One, if you become so desperate for social approval, in a histrionic sense, or wanting so much attention because of these feelings of conscious loneliness, because of previous experiences with alienation and disrupt to your 5 subconscious desires, well, this becomes antisocial as far as I'm concerned, because it's performative. You're only doing this to it's not true cluster A personality type. You're not actually wanting really of others' company. You're wanting them more of an object, more to see them as an object to fill this emotional void of relieving this feeling of horror that you'll have no one more so in relation to my theory of the histrionic, the borderline, the attention seeker, the eccentric, and the there was another one in there, and the fear of dying alone in psychopathology, which, just to update, I changed the name of that one. It's no longer just the histrionic, the borderline, and the attention seeker, as I believe eccentric behavioral disorder and I'm trying to recall the other one, and another personality disorder. I believe that those are also very clearly the causality, the fear of dying alone is the causality for a large portion of cases for those psychological disorders. But anyway, so in relation to that sense, you're basically just using them as this tool to have comfort when you're on your deathbed or when you're approaching the ending of your life. But on the other end of that, to antisocial personality disorder, sociopathy/psychopathy, schizoid personality disorder, social anxiety and anxiety disorders, paranoid disorders, with some dismissive behavioral disorder, and relation as well, domineering behavioral disorder. All these, this is, I believe, what can result from this idealization of loneliness, this idea that you need to be by yourself in order to feel any true, genuine comfort. Because now you're going too far towards this lack of wanting to be a part of human activity. And this is highly destructive. And I'm not encouraging you to go towards socialization at all costs. Performative as well, and it's destructive. You're not being genuine to your actual wants. But you will always go towards needing other people. And it's foolish to think otherwise. It's foolish to have this constant attempt at feeling completely comfortable alone when you're not going to feel comfortable alone. You're not. It's in your psychobiological genetics. And for people who say, well, there are those who have gone off and lived in the wilderness for 50 years, or there's people living on desolate islands who have decided, screw society, I don't like interactions with people, I hate the functioning of all the complex political and ideological situations, I'm going away from it. Well, no, most often they haven't. They still, even those who do live by themselves, off in the wilderness, they use tools created by humanity that they've learned from over their years of being in humanity's collective essence, or sense of familiarity. And for those who are saying, well, the examples of those who, use those tools, but they haven't interacted with anyone, it's a lie. It's an absolute lie. Like, there was this interview with someone who lived, it was by the channel, the documentary channel Great Big Story, of a man who went off to live on an island off the coast of Italy lonesome by himself, and only once in a while ships would pass by. But he lived off of trash that had washed up on the shore, and said that, well, he liked the solitude, and yeah, you're still fine. He liked the quiet of it, liked the lack of other human interference of what he, I guess, was comfortable with. Well, for those who are going to use, say, someone like him as an example, well, he's wrong. He broke. He engaged and invited interviewers to the island to share his story with the world, with relation to what, last I checked, Great Big Stories YouTube channel, their subscriber count is right now over 5 million. 5 million people. Well, he broke. He clearly, whether knowingly or unknowingly, in relation to the subconscious and the conscious working together, because you can't have the conscious without the subconscious. You can have the subconscious without the conscious, but you can't have it the other way around, because the subconscious is the head controller of the conscious mind. Well, something clearly got to him, to a point where it's like, yeah, I want human interaction. I will engage with these people wanting of an interview. I will share my story with other people. Clearly, the solitude broke him. Not to a massively disruptive extent, but there was a point where he was like, okay, well, I guess I could. That I guess I could is the uncomfortability. Because we need human interaction. So, my message to, because, well, how long have I got still? Well, 4%. Well, okay. God, just switch up. Go on. Stretch out my knees a bit. So I'll lean down. In relation to my message to those who are of the community on the internet that idealizes this loneliness, self-care, please stop. Encourage having enjoyment for and being functional for when you don't have people around you. And in terms of self-acceptance, yes, keep encouraging that. And as far as I'm concerned, I wish more of internet discourse would encourage working on yourself for problematic aspects of your personhood that have come about psychologically, and praising those that are provably beneficial, engagement of critical thought and self-analysis, but stop encouraging this mentality of leave me alone and then maybe I'll interact with you. You shouldn't, and again, in relation to romantic and sexual relationships, you should not be using those to consciously absolve trauma. And you shouldn't need those, or even a platonic relationship, to be functional. You don't need those. I'm not encouraging going towards having a romantic partner, a sexual partner, or friends, a lot of friends, to be healthy for interactive loneliness and loneliness projection. No. But you do need interaction with people. You don't need to have any of those. You can mainly just be you need to be amongst your communities, interconnectedly, with various demographics. You need to be, as far as I'm concerned, a part of it, but you don't need to have each of these specific social dynamics.
it's fantastic to have those. Those are fantastic. I engage with those all the time. And same goes, well, just look at my sensualistic pornographic career. I engage in what I consider to be connective sexual empathy and expression of sexual connectivity through performance art, which is a part of pro-socialization, and in that regard should not be used. I discourage usage of pornography for absolvement of loneliness, which is not inherently what it is, the usage of it or making of it. So just sorry, I'm just getting 2%. Well, I'll wrap this up here. Please stop encouraging this totality of isolation. It might sound healthy on the surface because of the lack of satisfaction with other people in your life or of the grander societal constructs around you, but it's not. Those have come about, as far as I'm concerned, because of the mass societal traumatization and alienation of various people groups, and lack of understanding and lack of empathy and sympathy for an opposing or just a connected but distinct other group. Learn to be functional and have enjoyment whilst alone. Don't have that as your absolute, because you will need people. I would be, and just in terms of a practical, like, functioning for resources level, what I need to survive physiologically, food, water, shelter, all this, sleeping gear, electronic devices, whatever else, I'd be nowhere without anyone else. I don't know how to make these. At points, I need advice for how to get these. I would be nowhere, and so would you. You can't do everything by yourself. You shouldn't have to. I think the only reason that we encourage this so often, and especially in the professional psychiatric community, stop doing that, please. Psychiatric professionals, stop doing that. It's not an encouragement of self-independence. It's not. They only encourage it because they think most likely you're going to be traumatized enough in your life and not have people to rely on because of the mass spread of psychological damage and societal damage, as far as I'm concerned. That's really, I think, the only reason, and in terms of internet community, why people encourage it, because they think most likely children are going to be traumatized, so best to just encourage them to be self-functioning and happy alone. Most likely because of the destruction of terrible ideologies that have spread throughout the world, but that's not inherent. And we contribute, as far as I'm concerned, sadly, to the continuation of said things. So, it's our fault. I think we can fix it. So, I'll leave you with that right now. Hope you got something out of this video, and see you next time.
Really, again, just cruising on right through. This is not how you keep a community safe at all, if that's your intention. Okay, now this may seem a bit half anticlimactic, considering I signed off in the clip before this, but it's the next day after you'll see the main portion of the video, after you will have seen it, as well as the clips that were going to be the end bit of the saxophone and drum players in a park I was at last night. Incredibly talented individuals. But well, after editing all this together, I realized that I forgot to relate something in relation to, well, our psychobiology into the video, in relation to the raccoons that I had encountered now 4 nights prior. So I'll just quickly go over that here. So in relation to human beings understanding that we need social connectivity, in that is some amount of subconscious awareness to our environmental surroundings, and what we clearly see as a threat being that we are deprived of our need for loneliness projection and pro-socialization. And this relates, as I've come to realize, to Dr. Carl Gustav Jung's theory of synchronicity. Now, for those of you who don't know what synchronicity is, it was a theory that was proposed by Dr. Jung on the idea that human beings are in tune with the world around them. That we, psychologically, have an awareness of things in our social settings that, I guess, well, from a more classical Jungian perspective, in human social relations specifically, to how we function and what we need or what we share in similarity with one another. Now, coming from a neo-Jungian perspective myself, synchronicity for the longest while was one of the few theories of Carl Jung that I actually, for the most part, disagreed with. I saw it from the way that he described it in his lifetime, from what I've read and seen in terms of video footage of him actually explaining it. I used to think it was more on a, it seemed to be a bit more on a spiritual level of forces beyond our complete control in terms of our collective unity. Coming from more, again, like almost sounding religious, but not quite. So for the most part, it was one of the few that I primarily didn't agree with. And not because of it having a more spiritual sense, as far as I'm concerned, religion has been used to simplify science. Why most religions were created in the first place. But for the most part, it didn't seem like he explained it well from my understanding. But over the years, as I've later, especially since beginning my travels, re-examined his psychobiological theory of synchronicity, I came to understand it more as being in tune with the environment around you. Because I saw an old interview with Carl Jung giving an example for synchronicity on the example of a red car. So if you're having, say, two people are having a conversation and one mentions something about a red car, or about how they would like to purchase a car that is the color red, or they know someone who owns a red car, and at that same time a red car just happens to drive by on the road, or you see a red car parked somewhere close by you, or maybe just a red vehicle that isn't a standardized, well, car, but maybe a truck of some kind, or maybe, well, some sort, given the time period he was alive in the early 20th century, maybe just some sort of machine that was red, that had operations similar to a vehicle, or something of the sort. Well, it would be called, most people would probably call it a coincidence that happened at the same time as they were mentioning it. But in the view of synchronicity, it's not a coincidence. In what Jung described as it being basically human beings having similar wants and similar ideas for creation, to a point where you are most likely going to encounter something in daily activities that resembles something similar to what you're familiar with, which is absolutely true as far as I'm concerned. Now, as far as I'm concerned, it's still a coincidence. I don't agree with him that it's not a coincidence. A lot of people, especially those of, well, I guess it would be even if they're not aware of it. Synchronotic, I think is the other term for it. There are many of those who are of non-religious discourse who don't believe in coincidences, that things do happen for a reason, which is true. Everything happens for a reason, not of any sort of higher power as far as I'm concerned, but in relation to that, I still do believe that means coincidences exist. A coincidence is something that, well, happened out of nowhere, basically, in similarity to what you had experienced, or maybe something you were referring to at the time. As far as I'm concerned, that's still a coincidence, but that's explainable by reason and logical deduction. And in this regard, I would say synchronicity. So that is something that I do believe in now. But in relation to the raccoons that I encountered in the woods back there, proof of that would be, I mentioned how I dozed off into sleep, and then about 2 hours later I woke up. Just out of the blue I woke up. There's nothing that I could tell immediately that disturbed my halting of consciousness neurologically, that all of a sudden caused my reticular activating system to react all of a sudden and reject consciousness and wake up. there was nothing I can tell that I could immediately tell that did that. Because I didn't hear, even though I heard twigs and grass crumpling and snapping from the raccoons approaching once I was awake. Once I woke up, I didn't immediately hear that. At least not that I was aware of. So, as far as I'm concerned, even though I was asleep, something in my surrounding environment disturbed my sense of external perception unconsciously, both literally in terms, both physiologically unconsciously and psychologically in terms of the subconscious. I wasn't aware that what was approaching me were just a group of raccoons. And in relation to that, as I said, this being, as far as I'm concerned, a part of psychobiology, in relation to interactive loneliness, we know that we need other human beings for our emotional biology to function nominally. We know that we need it. We can't genuinely have a healthy psychological state without it. So, yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there. And I forgot to when I made the main portion of this video, but I just wanted to put that in. So, now is the actual end of the video. Sorry for the strange editing, or the more out of sync editing, I guess call it, but well, there you go. Hope you enjoyed. Bottom line is, stop encouraging people to just find peace being alone. You won't. You can find enjoyment being alone, and you can be functional to a degree whilst being alone, but not fully. So please stop. Both those of the internet community, and especially those of the regulatory healthcare psychiatric community. It's not good for your patient's health at all. And it sounds very much like encouragement of anti-socialization. So, now have a good day.